Welcome, dear friends, to the Crimson Academy's course on the Advent of Divine Justice. Dear friends, we're going to share with you a brief overview on the Advent of Divine Justice. The Advent of Divine Justice reads like a 77-page poem, written in December 1938. At a time when Europe was showing signs of profound unrest, which led less than a year later to the outbreak of the Second World War. This letter, addressed to the Baha'i community of the United States and Canada, focuses on the nature and scope of America's divinely ordained mission, and states that the impelling force of circumstances will inevitably oblige it to overcome its various challenges and execute the tasks which lie ahead. The beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi meticulously lists such characteristics as are imperative if Baha'is in North America are to carry out its mission. Among them, the beloved guardian specifically mentions a rectitude of conduct, an abiding sense of undeviating justice, adherence to the obligation of chastity and holiness, and a fraternity freed from that cancerous growth of racial prejudice which is eating into the vitals of an already debilitated society. American society, the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi points out, is immersed in a sea of materialism, a prey to one of the most virulent and long-standing forms of racial prejudice, and notorious for its political corruption, lawlessness, and laxity in moral standards. In fact, he emphasizes that it is not because of any racial superiority, social capacity, or spiritual distinction that America was chosen as champion builders of the administrative order, but because it was a nation stained by political corruption and moral license. The letter also sets out the requirements of Abdu'l-Bahá's divine plan and the 7-year plan, mentioning in turn the teaching requirements that are incumbent upon all believers and the need for thorough intellectual familiarization with the history, social principles, and spiritual teachings of both the Baha'i faith and its predecessor, Islam. The beloved guardian encourages the American Bahá'ís to consider pioneering within the Americas and stresses the importance of rearing permanent local and national institutions within the United States and across the two continents. The importance of the participation of Baha'i youth in the execution of this mission is also underlined by the beloved guardian. The beloved guardian states, youth can contribute so decisively to the virility, the purity, and the driving force of the life of the Baha'i community. And upon them must depend the future orientation of its destiny and the complete unfoldment of the potentialities with which God has endowed it. The beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi explains that the pervasive and intensifying political turmoil of the late 1930s in itself presented an ideal opportunity both for the spiritual growth of the Baha'i community and for the wider dissemination of the message of Baha'u'llah. These recurrent crises, beloved guardian states, which with ominous frequency and resistless force are afflicting an ever-increasing portion of the human race, must of necessity continue, however impermanently, to exercise in a certain measure their baleful influence upon a world community which has spread its ramifications to the uttermost ends of the earth. Later, the beloved guardian writes that the opportunities which the turmoil of the present age presents, with all the sorrows which it evokes, the fears which it excites, the disillusionment which it produces, the perplexities which it creates, the indignation which it arouses, the revolt which it provokes, the grievances it engenders, the spirit of restless search which it awakens, must in like manner be exploited for the purpose of spreading far and wide the knowledge of the redemptive power of the faith of Baha'u'llah, and for enlisting fresh recruits in the ever-swelling army of his followers. The synchronization of such world-shaking crises, he goes on to say, with the progressive unfoldment and fruition of their divinely appointed task, is itself the work of providence. Such simultaneous processes of rise and fall, of integration and of disintegration, of order and chaos, with their continuous and reciprocal reactions on each other, are but aspects of a greater plan, one and indivisible, whose source is God, whose author is Baha'u'llah, the theater of whose operations is the entire planet, and whose ultimate objectives are the unity of the human race and the peace of all mankind. Much of what the beloved guardian was telling the American Baha'i community in 1939 is distressingly applicable to the socio-political context in which the world finds itself today. The light of religion is dimmed, and moral authority is disintegrating. The beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi writes, "The nations of the world have, for the most part, fallen a prey to battling ideologies that threaten to disrupt the very foundations of their dearly won political unity. Agitated multitudes in these countries seethe with discontent, are armed to the teeth, are stampeded with fear, and groan beneath the yoke of tribulations engendered by political strife, racial fanaticism, national hatreds, and religious animosities. This, therefore, represents an ideal time for Baha'i youth to trigger change." A few more excerpts from this precious and often quoted document we share with you. A world torn with conflicting passions and perilously disintegrating from within finds itself confronted at so crucial an epoch in its history by the rising fortunes of an infant faith, a faith that at times seems to be drawn into its controversies, entangled by its conflicts, eclipsed by its gathering shadows, and overpowered by the mounting tide of its passions. In its very heart, within its cradle, at the seat of its first and venerable temple, in one of its hitherto flourishing and potentially powerful centers, the as yet unemancipated faith of Baha'u'llah seems indeed to have retreated before the onrushing forces of violence and disorder to which humanity is steadily falling a victim. The strongholds of such a faith, one by one and day after day, are to outward seeming being successively isolated, assaulted, and captured. As the lights of liberty flicker and go out, as the din of discord grows louder and louder every day, as the fires of fanaticism flame with increasing fierceness in the breasts of men, as the chill of irreligion creeps relentlessly over the soul of mankind, the limbs and organs that constitute the body of the faith of Baha'u'llah appear, in varying measure, to have become afflicted with the crippling influences that now hold in their grip the whole of the civilized world. You find this in page 5 of Advent Divine Justice. Among the opportunities which stand out preeminently in any attempt to survey the possibilities of the future are the multitudinous issues that must be faced, the obstacles that must be overcome, and the responsibilities that must be assumed to enable a sore-tried faith to pass through the successive stages of unmitigated obscurity, of active repression, and of complete emancipation, leading in turn to its being acknowledged as an independent faith, enjoying the status of full equality with its sister religions, to be followed by its establishment and recognition as a state religion, which in turn must give way to its assumption of the rights and prerogatives associated with the Baha'i state, functioning in the plenitude of its powers, a stage which must ultimately culminate in the emergence of the worldwide Baha'i Commonwealth, animated wholly by the Spirit and operated solely in direct conformity with the laws and principles of Baha'u'llah. And friends, this was an Advent to Divine Justice, pages 14 through 15. And another quote, "Let not, however, the invincible army of Baha'u'llah, who in the West and at one of its potential storm centers is to fight in his name and for his sake one of its fiercest and most glorious battles, be afraid of any criticism that might be directed against it. Let it not be deterred by any condemnation with which the tongue of the slanderer may seek to debase its motives. Let it not recoil before the threatening advance of the forces of fanaticism, of orthodoxy, of corruption, and of prejudice that may be leagued against it. The voice of criticism is a voice that indirectly reinforces the proclamation of its cause. Unpopularity but serves to throw into a greater relief the contrast between it and its adversaries, while ostracism is itself the magnetic power that must eventually win over to its camp the most vociferous and inveterate amongst its foes." Friends, this was in page 42 of Advent Divine Justice. The field is indeed so immense, the period so critical, the cause so great, the workers so few, the time so short, the privilege so priceless, that no follower of the faith of Baha'u'llah worthy to bear his name can afford a moment's hesitation. That God-born force, irresistible in its sweeping power, incalculable in its potency, unpredictable in its course, mysterious in its workings, and awe-inspiring in its manifestations. A force which, as the Bab has written, vibrates within the innermost being of all created things, and which, according to Baha'u'llah, has through its vibrating influence upset the equilibrium of the world and revolutionized its ordered life. Such a force, acting even as a two-edged sword, is under our very eyes, sundering on the one hand the age-old ties which for centuries have held together the fabric of civilized society, and is unloosing, on the other, the bonds that still fetter the infant, as yet unemancipated faith of Baha'u'llah. And friends, this was an Advent to Divine Justice, pages 46 through 47. The opportunities which the turmoil of the present age presents, with all the sorrows which it evokes, the fears which it excites, the disillusionment which it produces, the perplexities which it creates, the indignation which it arouses, the revolt which it provokes, the grievances it engenders, the spirit of restless search which it awakens, must, in like manner, be exploited for the purpose of spreading far and wide the knowledge of the redemptive power of the faith of Baha'u'llah, and for enlisting fresh recruits in the ever-swelling army of his followers. So precious an opportunity, so rare a conjunction of favorable circumstances may never again recur. Now is the time, the appointed time, for the American believers, the vanguard of the host of the Most Great Name, to proclaim through the agencies and channels of a specially designed administrative order their capacity and readiness to rescue a fallen and sore-tried generation that has rebelled against its God and ignored its warnings, and to offer it that complete security which only the strongholds of their faith can provide. Friends, this is from the Advent to Divine Justice, page 48. Thank you, dear friends.